The morning sun cast long shadows across the calm waters as Sarah adjusted the fishing nets on her modest 20-foot boat. Her weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency, the kind that comes from years of working the water. The gentle lapping of waves against the hull created a peaceful rhythm that she had grown to love during these early morning hours. In the distance, a white vessel with distinctive orange stripes cut through the water toward her position. The Coast Guard cutter moved with purpose, its powerful engines creating a wake that would soon reach her small craft. Sarah glanced up from her work, noting the approaching vessel with the calm attention of someone accustomed to encounters with authority. The radio crackled to life on her dashboard. "Attention fishing vessel, this is Coast Guard Cutter Vigilant. Prepare to be boarded for routine inspection." Sarah reached for the radio with steady fingers, her voice clear and professional as she responded. "Coast Guard Cutter Vigilant, this is fishing vessel Sea Breeze. Standing by for boarding." She could see the officers on deck now, their uniforms crisp in the morning light. From their distance, she appeared to be exactly what they expected, another small-time fisher working the coastal waters. But where in the world are you watching from right now, and what time is it there as this story unfolds across the water? The Coast Guard cutter pulled alongside with practiced precision, its hull towering over Sarah's small fishing boat. Two officers prepared to board, their movements efficient but casual. The younger officer, Petty Officer Martinez, carried a clipboard and wore the confident expression of someone conducting routine business. Chief Warrant Officer Reynolds stepped aboard first, his boots landing heavily on the deck. He glanced around the modest vessel with barely concealed dismissal, taking in the simple fishing equipment and weathered appearance of both boat and owner. "Ma'am, we're conducting routine inspections of fishing vessels in this area," Reynolds announced, his tone carrying the authority of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. "We'll need to see your fishing license, vessel registration, and identification." Sarah nodded calmly, moving toward the small cabin where her documents were stored. "Of course, officer. Everything's in order." Martinez exchanged a glance with his superior, both men clearly expecting this to be a straightforward encounter with a local fisher. The woman before them appeared unremarkable, her simple work clothes and sun-weathered appearance fitting their assumptions perfectly. The morning breeze carried the scent of salt and seaweed as Sarah retrieved a folder from the cabin. Her movements remained steady and unhurried, displaying none of the nervousness that often accompanied such official encounters. She had dealt with authority before, though these officers had no way of knowing the true extent of those experiences. Sarah handed over her fishing license and vessel registration with quiet efficiency. Reynolds examined the documents with cursory attention, his eyes scanning the standard forms with the bored precision of routine inspection. Martinez checked items off his clipboard, both officers maintaining their assumption that this was just another ordinary stop. "Everything appears to be in order here," Reynolds said, though his tone suggested this was merely the beginning of their examination. "Now we'll need to inspect your catch and equipment for compliance with current regulations." He moved toward the fishing nets with the casual authority of someone who expected no resistance. Sarah stepped aside to give him access, her posture remaining relaxed despite the increasingly thorough nature of the inspection. Martinez began examining the boat's equipment, checking registration numbers against his records. "Ma'am, how long have you been operating this vessel in these waters?" he asked, pen poised over his clipboard. "About 3 years regularly," Sarah replied, her voice steady and informative. "I keep detailed logs of all my activities if you need to review them." The officers exchanged another glance, their confidence growing with each routine answer. This was exactly the kind of straightforward inspection they had conducted dozens of times before. The woman seemed cooperative and her paperwork appeared legitimate, but their job required thoroughness. Reynolds lifted a section of netting, examining the mesh size with practiced scrutiny. The morning sun climbed higher, casting shorter shadows across the deck as the inspection continued its methodical progression. The inspection continued with methodical precision as Reynolds examined the fishing equipment more closely. He found nothing unusual, but his demeanor suggested he was just getting started. Martinez completed his documentation, checking off boxes with mechanical efficiency. "Ma'am, we're also going to need to inspect your cabin and storage areas," Reynolds announced, his tone taking on a slightly more authoritative edge. "Standard procedure for vessels operating in this sector." Sarah gestured toward the small cabin without hesitation. "Feel free to look around, officer. There's nothing unusual aboard." The two men moved into the cramped space, their presence immediately dominating the modest interior. Reynolds opened storage compartments while Martinez examined the simple navigation equipment. Their movements were thorough but carried an air of going through the motions. "This is pretty basic equipment for someone working these waters regularly," Martinez observed, running his finger along the dated GPS unit. "Most commercial operators have upgraded to newer systems by now." Sarah watched them work with patient calm, her hands clasped loosely behind her back. "I prefer reliable equipment over flashy gadgets," she replied simply. "The old systems work just fine for my needs." Reynolds emerged from examining a storage locker, brushing dust from his uniform. The dismissive expression on his face had grown more pronounced as he found exactly what he expected, a modest fishing operation run by an unremarkable civilian woman. Reynolds straightened up from his inspection, a slight frown creasing his brow. "Ma'am, we've noticed some inconsistencies that require further investigation. Your operation seems unusually minimal for someone claiming to fish these waters professionally." Sarah's expression remained neutral, though something shifted almost imperceptibly in her posture. "What kind of inconsistencies, officer?" Martinez consulted his clipboard with renewed focus. "Your equipment is outdated, your catch records show irregular patterns, and frankly, this vessel doesn't match the profile of legitimate commercial fishing operations we typically encounter." The accusation hung in the salt air between them. Reynolds stepped closer, his demeanor becoming more confrontational. "We're going to need to conduct a more thorough search, and I'm afraid we'll have to detain this vessel pending further investigation." Sarah's calm never wavered, but those who knew her well would have recognized the subtle straightening of her shoulders. "I understand you have a job to do, officer, but I can assure you that everything aboard this vessel is completely legitimate." "That's what they all say," Reynolds replied dismissively. "Martinez, start documenting everything for seizure procedures. We'll sort this out back at the station." The younger officer moved to begin the process while Reynolds maintained his position of authority. "Have you ever witnessed someone being completely underestimated based on appearances?" The morning sun continued its climb as the situation escalated beyond routine inspection. Martinez began photographing the boat's interior while Reynolds radioed back to his cutter. "Coast Guard Station, this is Cutter Vigilant. We have a potential violation here. Requesting backup for vessel seizure procedures." Sarah listened to the radio chatter with growing concern, though her outward composure remained steady. "Officers, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. If you'll allow me to provide additional documentation, I'm confident we can resolve this situation." Reynolds cut her off with a dismissive wave. "Ma'am, we've heard enough excuses. Your operation doesn't add up, and until we can verify your claims back at the station, this vessel is being impounded." The accusation struck at something deeper than Sarah's patience. She had spent years earning respect through service and sacrifice, only to find herself dismissed by officers who saw nothing beyond her modest appearance and simple boat. Martinez continued his documentation while Reynolds maintained his aggressive stance. "You can file a complaint later if you think we're wrong," he said with barely concealed condescension. "But right now, you're coming with us for questioning." Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. What would you do if you found yourself in this situation, completely misjudged by people who should know better? The morning breeze carried the sound of approaching engines as additional Coast Guard vessels responded to Reynolds' call for backup. The situation was spiraling beyond anyone's initial expectations. The second Coast Guard vessel approached rapidly, its crew preparing boarding equipment. Reynolds watched with satisfaction as his backup arrived, clearly viewing this as validation of his suspicions about the unremarkable woman before him. "Ma'am, you're going to need to step away from any personal items while we secure this vessel," he commanded, his authority now reinforced by additional personnel. This is standard seizure protocol. Sarah stood her ground, her voice taking on a quality that hadn't been there before. Officer Reynolds, before you make a decision you might regret, I strongly suggest you examine my identification more carefully. Something in her tone made Martinez pause in his documentation. The younger officer glanced between Sarah and his superior, sensing a shift in the dynamic that he couldn't quite identify. We've already seen your fishing license, lady, Reynolds replied impatiently. Unless you've got something else that changes the fact that your operation looks suspicious as hell. Sarah reached slowly into her jacket pocket, her movements deliberate and controlled. Actually, officer, I do have something else. Something I was hoping we wouldn't need to discuss. The backup crew began boarding as Sarah withdrew a slim leather wallet. Her fingers moved with practiced precision as she opened it, revealing credentials that would fundamentally alter everything these officers thought they knew about the situation they had stumbled into on this seemingly routine morning patrol. Sarah extended the leather wallet toward Reynolds with steady hands. The morning sun caught the metallic surfaces within as she opened it fully, revealing credentials that made Martinez's clipboard suddenly seem insignificant. Reynolds reached for the wallet with the same casual dismissiveness he had maintained throughout the encounter. His eyes moved across the identification with practiced efficiency, expecting to find nothing more than standard civilian documentation that would confirm his assumptions. Then his expression changed. The confident authority drained from his face as his eyes widened, moving from the photograph to Sarah's calm features and back again. His hand trembled slightly as he held the credentials closer, as if unable to believe what he was seeing. Martinez noticed his superior's sudden change in demeanor. "Chief, what is it?" Reynolds couldn't immediately find his voice. The backup crew continued their boarding preparations, unaware that the entire situation had just transformed into something completely different from what they had expected. Sarah watched Reynolds process the information with patient silence. The same calm that had carried her through the entire encounter now took on a different quality, the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to this moment of recognition. The credentials in Reynolds' shaking hands told a story that contradicted everything he and his team had assumed about the modest woman standing before them on this unremarkable fishing boat. Reynolds' face had gone pale as he continued staring at the credentials. His mouth opened and closed without sound, the weight of his mistake becoming clearer with each passing second. The backup crew finished boarding, their movements creating a stark contrast to their superior's frozen state. "Chief, talk to me," Martinez pressed, growing more concerned by his commander's unusual reaction. "What's in that wallet?" Reynolds finally managed to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ma'am, we had no idea." The arrogance that had defined his entire approach to this encounter had evaporated completely. Sarah extended her hand calmly. "May I have my identification back, Officer Reynolds?" He handed the wallet back with hands that still trembled slightly, his eyes never leaving her face as he tried to reconcile the woman before him with the credentials he had just examined. The backup crew sensed something had changed but remained uncertain about the nature of the shift. Martinez stepped closer to his superior. "Chief, what's going on here?" Reynolds swallowed hard, his professional composure struggling to reassert itself. "Martinez, we need to stand down immediately. This entire operation needs to be terminated." The younger officer looked between his commander and Sarah with growing confusion. The morning sun continued its climb overhead, but the atmosphere on the small fishing boat had transformed completely from the routine inspection that had begun just minutes earlier. Sarah secured her credentials back in her jacket with the same measured precision she had maintained throughout the encounter. The leather wallet disappeared, but its impact continued to reverberate through every officer present. Reynolds straightened his shoulders, attempting to salvage some dignity from the situation. "Ma'am, on behalf of the United States Coast Guard, I want to formally apologize for this misunderstanding. Had we known about your status, this inspection would have been conducted very differently." The backup crew exchanged confused glances as their commander's entire demeanor shifted from aggressive authority to respectful deference. Martinez finally found his voice. "Chief, would someone please explain what just happened here?" Sarah's expression softened slightly, though her bearing remained unmistakably professional. "Officer Martinez, your superior just discovered that I hold active security clearances at levels that make this fishing boat inspection somewhat irregular." The full weight of the revelation hit Martinez like a physical blow. His clipboard suddenly felt absurd in his hands as he realized they had been treating someone with significant government authority as a common civilian suspect. Reynolds cleared his throat nervously. "Ma'am, if I may ask, what brings someone of your background to operating a fishing vessel in these waters? Have you ever seen someone's entire world change in an instant when the truth is finally revealed?" Sarah's calm smile held depths that these officers were only beginning to comprehend. Sarah regarded the assembled officers with measured consideration before answering Reynolds' question. "Sometimes the most effective cover for sensitive operations is hiding in plain sight, officer. A simple fishing boat attracts far less attention than official vessels." The implications of her words settled over the Coast Guard crew like a heavy blanket. Martinez lowered his clipboard completely, finally understanding that they had stumbled into something far beyond their clearance level. Reynolds nodded slowly, his professional training helping him process the situation despite his personal embarrassment. "Ma'am, is there anything we can do to make amends for this interference with your operation?" Sarah's expression remained neutral, though a hint of understanding flickered in her eyes. "Your apology is sufficient, Chief. However, I trust this encounter will remind you and your crew about the dangers of making assumptions based on appearances." The backup crew began quietly preparing to depart, their earlier confidence replaced by respectful uncertainty. The routine inspection had become an unexpected lesson in humility for everyone involved. Martinez found his voice again. "Ma'am, will this incident need to be reported through our chain of command?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "That depends entirely on whether you've learned something valuable today about treating every encounter with appropriate respect, regardless of initial appearances. Share this story with someone who needs to understand that everyone deserves dignity." Reynolds stepped back and rendered a proper salute, his crew following suit with newfound respect. "Ma'am, it has been an honor, despite the circumstances. We won't forget this lesson." Sarah returned the salute with practiced precision, her simple fishing clothes unable to diminish the authority that now radiated from her bearing. The morning sun had climbed higher, casting the entire encounter in clearer light than when it had begun. The Coast Guard crews prepared to depart, their movements now marked by professional courtesy rather than dismissive routine. Martinez carefully stowed his clipboard, understanding that some encounters couldn't be reduced to standard documentation. As the official vessels pulled away, Sarah returned to her fishing nets with the same calm efficiency she had displayed throughout the confrontation. The waters returned to their peaceful rhythm, though the officers aboard the departing cutters would carry this experience with them for years to come. Reynolds radioed his station with a simple message. "Coast Guard Station, this is Cutter Vigilant. Inspection complete. No violations found. Vessel cleared to continue operations." What he didn't transmit was the profound lesson his crew had learned about respect, assumptions, and the hidden depths that exist in every person they encounter. Sarah's modest fishing boat continued its work on the calm waters, a reminder that strength and authority often come in the most unexpected packages, waiting to be revealed when circumstances demand it.